Hi everyone!
Hey,
Today we're diving into a topic that fascinates a lot of people, because many have kids and others are trying to change careers themselves. Professions of the future. We've got a mix of questions, some futuristic, some down to earth. So, let's go.
let's go.
Everything, as we know, starts with education. That's where society begins. So first question, what will education of the future look like? How will higher education fit into that system? Will there even be higher education?
You see, it works like this. When my father studied, for example, his technical college, what we called a technicum, was considered a serious level of education back then. And that allowed him to hold a pretty high position and manage a lot of people. He used to tell me he had over 400 employees under his supervision. Now, so many young people get a college degree, but very few ever use it for its intended purpose. We get an education and then never apply it. So we have two paths of development. Either we'll keep getting our education mechanically, based on what we think or what our parents or friends recommend, or we'll move intuitively in the direction that matches our purpose and inner state. In that case, the energy flow gives maximum results, both for the person and for society. Otherwise, we're lucky if even 10% of people who earn a degree actually use it in a way that benefits themselves and others.
Okay, but there are universities, Ivy League schools, for instance, or genuinely high-quality programs that people still aim for. Well, not everyone, but those interested in science. How relevant will that kind of education be in the future? If you're saying that the class of people who graduate in business, finance, or economics barely use their degree, then I assume that type of education will fade away?
The question is,
Or will its importance fade?
we have to understand that education as a system has fallen far behind the pace of progress. If we look at how kids were taught 100 years ago and how they're taught today, almost nothing has changed. Maybe the only difference is that digital gadgets were added, and honestly, they often do more harm than good. Even basic motor skills, handwriting, building, making things with your hands, develop the brain more than memorizing or doing mental math. That's why our task is to develop tactility, the ability to do things with our hands. And automatically, for each child, it's crucial to find their internal potential and inclinations. Without that, we're just wasting a massive amount of energy, both teachers and students.
Yeah, online education is trending now. There are classes starting as early as age 3. But let's look at directions that are truly solid and significant. Programs with deep research and real academic qualifications. How long will those stay relevant and prestigious?
Let's put it this way. We'll look at this from the point of view of futurology, meaning the best possible version of development where the human factor comes first. Even scientists who achieve breakthroughs will still be secondary. What comes first is their inner state, their harmony with the world and with society. And that's only going to become more important. Because people who are just carriers of knowledge, they don't necessarily have the potential to make the world better. What matters is that these knowledge carriers also have the emotional and psychological qualities that allow them, when communicating with children, to amplify the kids' abilities, capacities, and potential.
Okay, and the next question is based on the present time. The rise of neural networks and all these gadgets for education. Someone asks, even today, we have to retrain several times in our lives just to keep up. How flexible will people of the future have to be?
Actually, everyone has to be flexible. Because the moment we become rigid and think we're developing, we're already degrading. Earlier, education was more well-rounded, not because we had to be versatile, but to keep the brain flexible so we could see the world differently. Experiments with children showed that when they started learning earlier, by the age of 30 to 35, they achieved much better results. The later they began, the less they could reach by that same age. But let's be honest, the way education works now, especially for kids, it preserves them, it stresses them, and it develops only part of the brain. If education were structured like play, creating interest and joy, it would benefit everyone. And another key thing, the teacher's state, mental, emotional, social, and family-wise, is critical. That's primary, because the teacher transmits a state. Like a saint who heals or a miracle worker, they might hold a title, priest, professor, but what really matters is their inner state, because that's what creates real change.
Okay, let's look at this from the position of an adult facing a crisis. Say their parents sent them to study law or economics, the right career. And now they realize everyone's coding, training neural networks, building apps, and they're tired of sitting in an office for a modest salary. So they start learning something new, from blogging to other trendy fields.
The first thing to understand is it all depends on how much energy a person has. If their energy is low because they do things the proper way and their mental processes never drop below the head, then it's a problem. That's where depression starts. That's where people end up in therapy. That's where degradation begins. When a person acts purely from the mind, without including their feeling, they'll lose, even if they go learn something new. Especially now, because the world is shifting toward how much love is there in what we do. How much pleasure do we get from the process? How happy are we doing it? If someone's a professional doing everything right, but without soul, that's still degradation. Before, you could kind of live like that. People earned money, bought houses, had families, but it was all flat, like lived and died for nothing. Now that won't fly. The demand for authenticity is much higher. That's why we have to come down from the head into the heart, to start listening to what we feel, not chasing trends. But if a person thinks creatively, notices the good, stays curious, keeps growing, breaks the loops, stays open, I'm a man, I'm a woman, and admits honestly to what they're feeling, they'll reach what they want. If there's no honesty, no ability to notice beauty or joy, no creative mindset, whatever they do will lead to stagnation.
So as always, it comes down to inner resources, communication, and personal qualities. And chasing trends isn't the point. It's better to listen to yourself.
It's very important to listen to what you feel when you interact with any kind of information. If there's resonance and your energy grows, that's an inner rise. If there's dissonance and depletion, that's a sign to switch. But discipline is also crucial. Not the kind that feels like punishment or forced effort, not asceticism or grinding through pain. I'm talking about the discipline of interest. When you challenge yourself through what feels meaningful and genuinely beneficial.
Okay, next question. Kind of a weird one. It says, there's an opinion. Well, since there is such an opinion, let's look at it, though to me it seems obvious. It says, people in manual professions, builders, welders, carpenters, will always be in demand. Is that true? I'll clarify. The trend seems to be full robotization, especially in factories. Machines are taking over to cut labor costs. And in our previous episodes, we talked about how creative fields, and those that involve working with children, from nannies to teachers, will always stay relevant, because we see a certain social layer replacing live connection with YouTube and gadgets, while others want to preserve individuality and direct human contact, especially between a child and a person. So what do you think? Builders, welders, carpenters, or creative professions?
I think we'll still have builders, welders, carpenters, just with the ability to work with 3D printers at different levels, different skills, different complexities. The same professions will exist, but the tools will evolve. Just like accountants once used abacuses and later computers, welders and carpenters will eventually program machines that do the work. So the professions stay, but the qualifications rise.
That would be great. So the more creative the carpenter, the more they can collaborate with advanced tools.
Exactly. It'll require higher intelligence, and that means creativity too. But over time, it'll become natural. Remember when mobile phones were new and strange? Now even seniors use them. They're online. They text. They browse. 30 years ago, that would have sounded impossible.
Perfect example. So the real question is, will there always be demand for those trades?
The key is to make transition smooth, because what do we see today? Everyone's rushing into law, management, and marketing. As a result, we've got a shortage of people who can actually build things: machinists, carpenters, masons. 3D printing isn't everywhere yet, but we already have an oversupply of lawyers, managers, and marketers. We're oversaturating the internet and virtual space, and the physical world is collapsing from lack of real specialists: plumbers, masons, welders, carpenters, machine operators.
Let's keep going. Which of the existing professions will undergo the most transformation? That's a broad question, but maybe take a few areas you see clearly. Medicine, marketing, politics, or even carpentry. Which one will change beyond recognition?
Medicine, completely.
Medicine?
Yeah, today medicine is about money making, not healing. It's about creating systems of dependency, from insurance to clinic revenue. So medical institutions keep profiting. It's like in car manufacturing: you could fix a part, but it's more profitable to replace the entire module. Sure, that's faster, but it's wasteful. And now people have become disposable material for the medical industry. That's going to change drastically. The human being will come first. New technologies will emerge focused on psychology and perception, because most illnesses are psychosomatic. As soon as we understand that the foundation is hormonal balance, which depends on our mental, emotional, and sensory state, everything else aligns. Normal metabolism, normal health, and a normal flow of life events, fewer injuries, fewer physiological distortions.
Yeah, in our previous episodes we talked about that. Healers, energy work, new medicine formats, and you mentioned marketing too.
I'll interrupt you here, because today's marketing is built on extracting money from people. That's broken. It always backfires. Health problems, relationship issues, troubles with kids. What really matters is how much joy your services or products bring. How much happiness people feel when they use what you create. Because nothing cancels out love. Love means harmony. I've seen it many times. When people do something just for money, that money brings no pleasure. Even when they spend it, it's empty, because the law still works. Do good, and it'll return multiplied. If your actions are driven by greed, I want success, money, fame, and others become expendable in that process, then you create an exchange where nobody wins. Whenever we interact, there's a 100% energy exchange. If people don't receive joy, neither do we. And that imbalance will only get stronger in the future. That's why everyone needs to do what they love. To provide services only to those who truly need them, not to push, manipulate, or trick people through marketing, NLP, or perfectly designed ads that sell to those who don't need it. If someone's life doesn't improve through your work, you'll pay for it, karmically. Your kids will too, because life isn't about getting ahead. It's about staying in harmony.
Still, I've heard this question. Let's say I open a service business, windows or appliance repair. Isn't it normal to promote it through email campaigns or funnels to get ahead of competitors?
It depends on whether the person you're talking to keeps their freedom of choice. Even when we talk to friends or family, there's a universal law. We can offer, but we can't pressure. We can't force, manipulate, or guilt people into buying. The moment we push, we create dependency on those we've manipulated. If they end up not using what we sold them or get no benefit, we lose potential. We lose health, development, and psychological balance.
So the key is to avoid that closing the deal at any cost attitude. What sales coaches always talk about.
Exactly. That whole thing will fade away. Or those who keep using it will get hit with instant feedback. It's already happening. People just don't see the connection. I've watched it many times. When someone's stingy, greedy, or acts from rational correctness, they always lose. You don't need to be wasteful, but you must act from sincerity and benefit. from what truly brings growth. And for that, you need an upbringing that develops sensitivity, tactile skills, honesty with yourself. If we give that to kids from the start, almost all of them will grow up brilliant and successful. They won't try to sell what others don't need, just like you wouldn't offer me a $300 haircut if I don't care about it.